She could name every bone in the human body by age 6. She could dismantle a rifle in under 40 seconds by age 10. And by the time she turned 16, she had never once used a phone, never sat inside a classroom, never had a single friend her own age. But none of that was the scary part. The scary part was what she found the night she went into the one room she was never supposed to enter. Her name was Aleksandra. At least, that's what she had always been told. She lived deep inside a forest in northern Finland with a man she called her father, a quiet, sharp-eyed man named Rolf who had spent her entire life teaching her things no normal parent teaches a child. Languages, wilderness survival, how to move through dense trees without making a single sound, how to read a person's body language before they even opened their mouth, how to stay calm when everything around you was falling apart. To Aleksandra, this was just normal life, the only life she had ever known. She didn't think it was strange because she had nothing to compare it to. She didn't know about the hidden files underneath the floorboards. She didn't know that Rolf checked over his shoulder every single day like he was waiting for something to come down that road. And she had absolutely no idea that somewhere, inside a building with no name on any official map, people had been watching her entire life unfold, and were already moving to come collect what they believed was theirs. This is the story of what happened when Aleksandra found out the truth, and what she did about it. The mornings always started the same way. Before the sun was fully up, before the birds had decided to make any noise, Aleksandra was already outside. The air in Finland at that hour was the kind of cold that bit into exposed skin and stayed there, but she didn't flinch at it. She had stopped flinching at the cold around age 8. Rolf had made sure of that. She ran the perimeter of the property first, 3 kilometers through the trees, over the frozen creek, back around through the dense spruce forest that grew so thick in some spots it blocked out almost all of the sky. She knew every route, every dip in the terrain, every branch that hung low enough to catch someone off guard if they weren't paying attention. She ran it fast, her breath coming out in sharp white clouds, her boots barely leaving a sound on the packed snow. After the run came the drills. Rolf had built a training area just behind the cabin. Nothing that would look like much to an outsider, just wooden posts and rope setups and a few weighted platforms, but she knew exactly what each piece was for. Balance, reaction speed, controlled force. She moved through all of it without being told, the way you move through something you've done so many times it stops being a decision and just becomes part of how your body exists in the world. Their afternoons were different. Mental work, languages, geography, code patterns, history, reading maps and satellite images. Things that felt like education but nothing like what she imagined real school looked like. Rolf had taught her 4 languages by 12. She could read a topographical map faster than most trained adults. She could look at a photograph of an unknown city and estimate the approximate latitude from the angle of the light and shadows. She thought Rolf was just a careful person, someone who had seen enough of the world to know it could turn dangerous without warning, and who had decided to raise her ready for it. She had never thought to ask why a man who claimed to just be her father needed to be that specific kind of careful. There was one rule in the house. Rolf had said it once, years ago, when she was small enough that she still looked up at him when they talked. The room at the end of the hall. You don't go in there. She had never gone in. Not because she feared breaking the rule. She was 16 now, not 5. But because some quiet, trained part of her had always felt something sitting behind that door that she couldn't name. A weight, pressure, like the room itself was holding something back. That winter, a week after her birthday, Rolf went outside to check the generator. The door at the end of the hall was left open about 4 inches. She could see the edge of a wooden desk, a lamp, a stack of folders. She stood in the hallway for a long moment. Then she pushed it open. The room was small and dense. Maps were pinned to one wall. Not hiking maps, not anything you would buy at a store, but surveillance-style photographs of buildings, compounds, and parking lots, each one printed with timestamps in the corners. A shortwave radio sat on the desk. And in the center of the desk, not hidden, not locked away, just sitting there like it had been recently read, a plain manila folder. Aleksandra picked it up. The first page had a photograph. A girl who looked like her but younger, maybe 9 or 10, sitting in a white clinical room under fluorescent lighting, wearing a gray shirt, staring directly at the camera with an expression that had no emotion at all. Behind the girl, just at the edge of the frame, was a logo on the wall. 2 letters inside a circle. She didn't recognize it. Below the photo was a printed document. German and English mixed. She read it without effort. Her eyes moved down the page fast. Phrases surfaced and stuck. Enhanced reflexes, accelerated language acquisition, psychological profiling. And at the bottom of the page, in a box labeled Notes, a line written by hand. Subject shows no signs of questioning origin. Recommend maintaining current isolation protocol. Guardian remains compliant. Guardian, not father. Guardian. The front door opened. Rolf's boots on the floor. She put the folder back exactly as she had found it, walked to the kitchen, and was standing at the counter when he came in. Her face was completely still. Somewhere in the report, they had listed her emotional suppression score as above average. She was only now beginning to understand what that actually meant about her life. Rolf looked at her for a moment longer than usual. Something in his expression shifted, so small that most people would have missed it. "Generator's fine," he said. "Good," she said. She didn't sleep that night. 3 days later, a black SUV came down the access road at 6 in the morning. Rolf saw it from the upstairs window. Aleksandra watched his face change in a way she had never seen before. The stillness he always carried broke open for just a second, and what was underneath it was fear. He came to her room at a run. "We go. Right now. Take nothing." She was already putting on her boots. They went out the back door and into the trees before the SUV had stopped moving. She followed without asking questions. Not because she didn't have them, but because she had been trained to read a situation, and the situation was clear. Running first. Answers later. They moved through the forest for 4 hours before Rolf slowed down enough to talk. He told her some of it. Not everything, but enough to crack the world she thought she lived in completely open. There was an organization. He called it KRONOS. It had started as a private intelligence program in the early 2000s, funded through layers of shell structures connected to 3 European governments, none of which had ever officially acknowledged it. The stated goal had been to produce elite operatives from childhood, children selected for specific genetic markers, then raised under controlled conditions to develop abilities that would take an adult operative years of standard training to reach. She was one of them, Subject 7. She had been placed into the program as an infant. Her biological parents, he stopped at that and looked away for a moment, jaw tight. She let it go. For now. Rolf had been assigned as her handler when she was 3 years old. His job was to isolate her, condition her, and deliver the outputs KRONOS required. He had done that job. But somewhere around the time she turned 5, he had started building something that wasn't in the program specifications. Something that wasn't a weapon. He had raised her like a person. KRONOS had tolerated it because her metrics were still strong. She was still developing the skills they wanted. They had monitored from a distance and let him run things his way as long as the numbers stayed right. But now she had hit whatever threshold they had been waiting for. And they had come to bring her in for activation. She asked him one question. "What does activation mean?" He didn't answer, which told her everything. They reached the city of Ulu 2 days later, on foot and by freight train. Rolf had a contact there, a woman named Petra who ran a small logistics company and who owed him something from years ago. She gave them forged documents, a car, and a bag with cash and a burner phone. Petra also had a 17-year-old daughter named Cass, who was the first person close to Aleksandra's age that Aleksandra had ever spent more than an hour with. Cass didn't know what Aleksandra was. She just saw a girl who had shown up looking like she'd been running through a forest for 2 days, which was accurate, and she handed her dry clothes and a bowl of soup and just started talking. Aleksandra didn't know what to do with someone who just talked. She answered in short sentences and watched Cass the way she watched everything. Reading expressions, body language, the gap between what people said and what they actually meant. She kept waiting for something to feel like a threat. It never did. Cass was just a person. A normal, warm, genuinely uncomplicated person who talked about her friends, complained about the city, and had strong opinions about movies she'd seen. and Aleksandra sat across from her at a kitchen table and felt something she had no easy name for move around in her chest. She thought it might be what wanting a normal life felt like. KRONOS found them the day after. Aleksandra noticed it first. A shift in Petra's behavior, subtle but readable. She had gone quiet after a phone call she said was about work. She had checked the front window twice in the same hour. She wasn't a traitor. She was a frightened person who had cracked just enough under pressure to let something slip to the wrong person. Aleksandra told Rolf. He didn't doubt her. They left within the hour. Cass grabbed her coat and followed without being asked, and there wasn't time to argue about it. So the three of them left together in the car Petra had given them. While Rolf drove, Aleksandra ran a frequency sweep on the burner phone using a technique from one of Rolf's notebooks. She found a transmitter. It was in the car. Not recently planted, it had been there for a long time. She looked at Rolf in the mirror. "How long have they been tracking us through this car?" "Long enough," he said. "But the car was never the only way they tracked you." She sat with that. She went back through everything she knew about herself. The assessments in the folder. Cognitive patterns. The way she solved problems. They had built her brain's decision pathways from childhood, which meant they had a model of how she thought. Probability map. They could predict her next move before she made it. "Then how do we stop being predictable?" she asked. Rolf was quiet. Then he said, "There's a place near Turku. A relay station, off every registry. Someone's been running it dark for years. A former subject. Someone who was in the program before you who got out and spent the last 15 years building a way to take it apart." Aleksandra thought about that. Someone like her, but older. Someone who already knew all of it. "They've been waiting for me," she said. It wasn't a question. "They've been waiting for the right moment," Rolf said. She pulled the transmitter from the wheel well at the next train station and left it on a northbound platform. Let KRONOS follow a signal heading in the wrong direction. The relay station looked like nothing from the outside. A low concrete structure behind an overgrown fence. No signage, no lighting visible through the windows. Inside it was warm, crowded with monitors and equipment, and smelled like old coffee and circuit boards. A woman was waiting. She was in her late 30s. She moved with the same economical precision that Aleksandra moved with, the kind of movement that doesn't waste anything. She had a scar along her left jaw and eyes that swept the room completely before she said a single word. Her name was Elon. She had been subject 3. She looked at Aleksandra for a long moment, the way someone looks at a thing that reminds them of a wound, and then said simply, "Sit down. There's a lot to cover." Over the next 2 hours, Elon laid out the full picture. KRONOS had been running for 22 years. 14 subjects total. 6 had been fully activated and placed inside legitimate intelligence networks, living under cover identities they believed were real. 4 had died during the program. 2 had been what Elon called decommissioned, and the way she said it made the word feel like a door closing on something that should have been a life. That left Aleksandra and Elon. The program was protected from above, funded through private structures attached to real government agencies, which meant anyone who tried to take it down through official channels ran directly into the people protecting it. Elon had tried that route 2 years ago. The evidence she'd handed over had been buried inside a week. But there was one thing that could actually break it. Inside KRONOS' central server archive was a single file containing the real identities of every official who had funded, authorized, and covered for the program over 2 decades. Politicians, intelligence directors, names, dates, financial transfers. KRONOS kept it as internal leverage, proof that could destroy the people above them, which meant those people could never turn on the program without destroying themselves. It was the only evidence that couldn't be made to disappear, because denying it would require too many powerful people to lie simultaneously and consistently in public. The file was stored in a facility outside Helsinki, a converted industrial building running as a private data company, heavily secured, staffed by people who were not security guards in any normal sense of the word. Aleksandra listened to all of it. Then she said, "You need someone who can get in and out of that facility." Elon looked at her steadily. "I needed someone trained to that level who also had the personal reason to do it. You didn't have the reason until 6 days ago. So you built the plan and waited for me to need it. Yes. Aleksandra looked at Rolf. He was standing by the door with his arms crossed, carrying something heavy in his expression that he was trying not to show. She had questions for him, real ones, the kind that didn't have easy answers. About her biological parents. About who he actually was underneath the role he had been assigned. About whether any part of the life he had built for her in that cabin had been real for him or just a long assignment he had managed to make feel human. Those questions were going to take longer than she had right now. She filed them away. She turned back to Elon. Show me the layout. They planned for 4 days. On the 5th, Aleksandra went in. She entered through a rooftop access panel mapped by Elon's satellite imaging. She moved through the interior the same way she had always moved through the forest. Low, quiet, aware of everything, making no decisions she hadn't already run through twice in her head. She found the server room on the 3rd floor, planted the extraction device Elon had built, waited 4 minutes in complete stillness while it pulled the file. Then the lights came on. 4 agents came out of a blind spot she hadn't seen. She ran the math in less than a second. For people in closed space, no exits behind her. They had been positioned too precisely. They had known she was coming or close enough, which meant KRONOS had run its probability map on her and guessed right. So she did the one thing Rolf had ever taught her that wasn't in any of KRONOS's manuals, because he had developed it himself, off protocol, just for her. He had called it the unexpected variable. She put the extraction device on the floor, raised both hands, and said clearly, "I'm not here for a fight. I'm here to show you what this place actually is." 2 of the 4 stopped, just for half a second. That hesitation told her everything she needed to know about them. They had doubt. They weren't fully certain. And people who aren't fully certain can be reached. The 3rd agent moved without hesitation, so she moved with him, used his own momentum to redirect him, put him down cleanly in under 2 seconds. The 4th came fast and she wasn't where he expected her to be. The 2 who had hesitated still didn't engage. They stood there looking at her. Young. Maybe barely older than she was. People who had been put in a room and told to stop a girl they'd been given no real information about. "You know what they do here," she said quietly. "You've seen enough to know." Neither of them spoke, but neither of them moved to stop her. She picked up the device. She walked out. The file went to 14 journalists across 7 countries at the same time. Elon had spent years building that network. The first story broke 8 days later. Within a month, for governments were in formal crisis, 2 intelligence directors had resigned without explanation, and the building outside Helsinki had been seized by an international task force that couldn't officially acknowledge why it was there. It wasn't a clean ending. It was never going to be clean. Some of the people named in that file had the kind of lawyers and connections that could stretch a legal process out for years. A few of the activated subjects, the 6 who had been living embedded lives, disappeared the moment the story went public. Some of them were probably still out there, but the machine was broken. The program that had built Aleksandra had taken 14 children and treated their lives as variables in an experiment, was now sitting in full public light. And things that live in the dark don't survive when the light hits them. Rolf was arrested as part of the wider investigation. Not by KRONOS, by a real authority. His involvement in the program, regardless of how he had shaped it, was still involvement. He had known what she was from the very beginning. He had spent 13 years deciding, day by day, how much of that truth to give her and how much to keep. Aleksandra sat in a formal room and gave her statement. At the end of it, she was asked whether she wanted to pursue additional action against Rolf specifically. She was quiet for a long time. She thought about the mornings in the cold. The way he had taught her not just how to survive but how to think. How to ask questions, how to read situations, how to trust her own judgment. The books he had found for her that weren't in any program manual, novels, histories, maps of places that had nothing to do with training. The one time she had asked him, when she was maybe 7 years old, whether a person who did something bad could still be a good person, and he had sat there for a full minute before answering. He had said, "I think some people spend their whole lives trying to find out." "I don't know yet," she told them, which was the most honest thing she could say. Cass ended up in the same city as her that winter. Not exactly by coincidence, Cass had looked into where Aleksandra was being processed and had simply relocated nearby, because that was the kind of person Cass was. She didn't make a big thing of it. She just showed up. Cass helped her do things she had never done. Get a library card. Figure out how a grocery store worked. Stand in an aisle for an unreasonably long time staring at cereal options and feeling the full weight of a completely ordinary decision. Small things. Things that should have been nothing. Things that felt to Aleksandra enormous. There were still questions without answers. Her biological parents, who they were, whether they were alive, whether they had given her up willingly or whether she had been taken from them. Elon was still working through sealed records, slowly and carefully. It would take time. And sometimes, in quiet moments, Aleksandra would catch herself doing things she couldn't fully turn off. Scanning a room the second she entered it. Reading a stranger's body language before they'd said a word. Running the geometry of a space without deciding to. The program had shaped the way her mind worked from the time she was an infant. Some of that wasn't going anywhere. But there was something else in her too. Something Rolf had added that KRONOS had never designed for and couldn't account for in any assessment. She didn't have a clean word for it. The ability to doubt the system she was built inside. The ability to look at what she had been made to be and ask whether she wanted to keep being it. The ability to choose, even when the choice was hard, even when everything she'd been trained to do pointed in a different direction. She picked the cereal with the orange box because Cass said it tasted like cardboard, and Aleksandra had recently decided she was allowed to find out things for herself, including the things that turned out to be mistakes. She paid. She walked outside into the cold. No one was watching. For the first time in her entire life, no one was watching. If you made it to the end of this one, you're exactly the kind of person who needs to hit subscribe, because the next story coming to this channel is going to hit even harder than this one did.